start with breaking news here on RT International. One of the world's most iconic figures, Cuba's former president Fidel Castro, has died. Cuban state TV announced he passed away on Friday, aged 90. The revolutionary legend is revered on the island nation, dubbed the country's founding father and the man who freed Havana from America's grip. Castro inspired revolutions worldwide by taking up the fight to end Washington's influence across Latin America. He became a universal symbol of resistance. During his final years, the iconic Cuban leader was rarely seen in public. Here are some of the most recent pictures. In September last year, Pope Francis visited him during a trip to the island. The encounter was described as intimate and familial. In May the same year, Francois Hollande became the first French president to visit Cuba in more than a century. As you can see, the revolutionary leader had retired his traditional military outfit at this point, sticking to a favoured tracksuit in old age. And here is the most recent video featuring the former Cuban president. It dates back to July 2015. Back then, he met food industry specialists in Havana. It's hard to overestimate Castro's achievements for the Cuban people. The first major reform he undertook was the 1961 literacy campaign. 10,000 schools were built all across the country, which led to the literacy rate among the adult population topping 98%. Even today, Cuba still ranks in the global top 3, along with Argentina and Uruguay. Castro also completely reorganized the health sector, which paved the way for Cuba having the longest life expectancy in the region, coupled with the lowest infant mortality rates. When the Soviet Union collapsed and could not afford to support its main ally in the West like before, the Cuban government looked to tourism as its lifeline. Domestic and foreign investors poured their resources into building hotels and improving infrastructure. It was a decision that paid off. These days, Cuba makes more than $2 billion annually from tourists. Like with every government, there have also been many drawbacks and much criticism of the Castro regime. The Cuban people are officially classed as living in poverty. The daily income for many citizens is less than $1. Also, civil liberties have been cut and independent newspapers shut down. There are also restrictions on the freedom of assembly and movement. You cannot protest against the authorities, and many people can't leave the country. While Cuba's security service is both large and powerful, soon after Castro came to power, he started pressuring the country's opposition, with some members forced from the island and others imprisoned. Castro left an impression on many political leaders, especially his contemporaries. For example, the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev claimed he treated Castro like a son. Among the younger leaders, acting president of Bolivia, Evo Morales, called the iconic Cuban leader the grandfather of all Latin American revolutionaries. Former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez said Castro was both a father and a comrade to him. But not everyone thought of the revolutionary leader so fondly. The former US President John F. Kennedy believed Castro betrayed the ideals of the Cuban Revolution. Yet those leaders who were once seen as political underdogs in their countries have always been inspired by his name. The legendary Nelson Mandela called Castro a tower of strength. American pastor and civil rights activist Jesse Jackson said the Cuban leader was the most honest and courageous politician he'd ever met. And the first Prime Minister of independent India, Jawaharlal Nehru, thought of Castro as a very brave man. Fidel Castro also had luck on his side, using his 9 lives to dodge what's being called a world record for the number of alleged assassination attempts. Cuba was once at the center of an episode that held the fate of humanity in its hands. It's the closest the world has ever come to a nuclear war, when in 1962 the Soviet Union deployed its arms to Cuba. It is, of course, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Let's take a look at how things were back then.
Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
As for every famous political figure, Fidel's life has been in the spotlight. And here are some of the most interesting facts. He holds a Guinness World Record for the longest speech. He talked for more than 7 hours back in 1986 at the Third Communist Party Congress in Havana. Throughout the time Castro ruled Cuba, the United States made its way through 9 different presidents. He also used to be a heavy smoker before finally giving up his favorite Cuban cigars in 1985. He summed up his long-term habit saying, "The best thing you can do with cigars is give them to your enemy." His hobbies included scuba diving, cooking and reading. His favorite book was For Whom the Bell Tolls by the American author Ernest Hemingway. And while there is no official number, many believe he's fathered as many as 8 children.